Control the kitchen chaos and streamline your back-of-house operations with Restaurant Technologies. Restaurant Technologies' Total Oil Management Solution is the end-to-end automated oil management system that delivers, filters, monitors, and recycles your cooking oil, taking the dirtiest job out of the kitchen and lets your employees focus on more important tasks. The Total Oil Management Solution helps prevent the burns, spills, slips, and falls that come with traditional oil management. Restaurant Technologies gives you and your employees peace of mind among the chaos of a commercial kitchen and can maximize efficiency for your business. And no upfront cost. Learn more about Restaurant Technologies and all the solutions they offer by visiting rti-inc.com or call 888-796-4997.
Hello and welcome to Menu Talk with Pat and Bret. I'm your co-host, Bret Thorn, Senior Food and Beverage Editor of Nation's Restaurant News and Restaurant Hospitality.
And I'm Pat Cobe, Senior Menu Editor at Restaurant Business. Welcome, everyone.
Yes, and how are you doing, Pat?
I'm doing well. It's been a good week.
Busy, a lot going on out in the world. Have you eaten anywhere particularly interesting?
Well, yesterday I went to a brunch at Hampton Inn and learned that Hampton Inn was the first hotel in the midscale segment like that to offer waffles. You know how they have make your own waffles and they have waffle irons in the lobby breakfasts, and they were the first to do it 40 years ago. So now some other, you probably haven't been to a lot of those kinds of hotels, but when you have kids, when we used to travel with our kids when they were young, we would go to places like that because kids have a lot of fun making waffles.
That's cool. Well, and that I've stayed in a few of those mid-scale, as you said, hotels with they have all the basics. They're not fancy, but they have what you need, and they're fine. And years ago, I was at some sort of consulting thing about one of those hotel chains rolling out a whole new menu and kind of trying to up their game. And I learned that there's a term called Smurf, which is a certain group of customers. I don't remember exactly what it means, but something like, it's like families and sports teams and military people who come and stay, and there's sort of their budget conscious bread and butter that go to that sort of hotel. So yeah, I just like that they're called Smurfs.
That's very cute.
Yeah.
Well, it's also very cute that Hampton Inn is partnering with Paris Hilton because she's part of the Hilton Hotel family, just as Hampton Inn is. And she is promoting these like 40th anniversary waffles that they're doing. And they're like strawberry sparkle waffles. So they were actually pink. We actually got to taste them. And they come with a little container of pink sparkles that you can sprinkle on top. Plus, you can put whipped cream and strawberries and chocolate chips on your waffles. So this is the way they're celebrating their, kind of invention of the waffle breakfast at hotels.
Well, that's fun. Have you noticed how much edible glitter is appearing on menus? There's a lot of it out there, especially in drinks.
Yeah, definitely. And it must be that they must be making it safer to eat now, because I think at one time some of them were a little questionable. So I think they must be safer. And I guess that's why they're showing up in a lot of drinks. It's a way to make it stand out, and it attracts people. You can probably upcharge $1 or $2 when you have a little glitter on top. So
sure. And it's photogenic. You can post it on the social media. You can shoot a video of it sparkling and all of that. And sure, I personally don't really want to eat glitter, but I mean, like everyone else, I eat with my eyes, so maybe I would enjoy it.
Yeah, I don't think you eat a large quantity of it. It's just like a couple of sprinkles.
Yeah, shimmering a little bit.
Yeah.
I went to a Japanese place in Midtown. Speaking of presentation, obviously a Midtown Japanese restaurant has beautiful presentation. And I had their sushi and sashimi platter, and it was presented with a little pitcher of either dry ice with water on it or liquid nitrogen. I'm not sure exactly, but it was all steamy, and that's fun. And the sushi was fine, like nothing crazy, and it made me reevaluate the sushi places in my new neighborhood of Sheepshead Bay in Brooklyn, deep
Hmm.
south of Brooklyn. A lot of Russians and Ukrainians and others from the former Soviet republics who apparently love sushi.
Oh, really?
Yeah, this is a thing of it. There are, I don't know, 8, 10 sushi bars within easy walking distance of my
Hmm.
apartment. And they also are all fine. They're not, there's nothing particularly fancy. You can get all of the different kind of rock and roll sushi rolls, with 3 different fish and avocados and fish roe and edible gold and whatever. Probably edible glitter also now. Or, the basic, please just give me your sushi sashimi platter. But what I've noticed is back not that long ago, the servers would tell you what each of the fish are. This is a fluke, and that's yellowtail, and this is tuna and salmon. And they don't do that, or haven't been doing that lately. They just say, here you go, here's your fish. And that's interesting. That,
Yeah.
and I mean, and I, maybe they've understood that most people, like, they just want the sushi. They don't know, which is the fluke and which the yellowtail or whatever. So it's just kind of standard. But I was ready for the explanation, and I didn't get one.
Yeah. Well, maybe they don't always use the same types of fish. They use what they can get. So I guess
Sure,
it's
but then
some.
all the more reason to tell me which one
Yeah.
it is. And maybe it's because now there are so many omakase meals at Japanese restaurants. So many places that just do omakase, which obviously is the chef serves whatever the chef wants to serve. And so maybe people are used to just sort of sitting back and having the experience done to them, as it were,
Hmm.
which is interesting considering how fussy they are about like Western food. They want to specify everything, they want to customize everything. It's an interesting contrast, I think.
It is. Well, I think sushi has become almost, like a commodity because everybody is growing up with it now, and it's ubiquitous. It's in supermarkets. You could even get it in like Dwayne Reed sometimes. So, or in one, a drugstore's case like Walgreens or CVS. So I think people just expect it to have what it always has and be like a hot dog. They don't tell you like what kind of meat is in a hot dog. So
True.
usually.
Um, and usually, I mean, convenience store hot dogs, in my experience, are actually bad. Whereas a lot of the commodity sushi, like, it's not bad.
It's not
But,
bad.
but I'm sure you've had Japanese food experiences where it's just ethereal and like
Hmm.
you take a bite and the balance of flavors and textures is magical. And I'm a little worried that that's getting lost.
Well, I think if you can afford it, those experiences are still
Well,
around. But
that's a very good point. In fact, a few weeks ago, I told you about my experience and on our audience about my experience at Hakubai at the Kitano Hotel, which was exactly like that. Everything very precious and wonderful and beautiful. And I guess the fact that there's commodity sushi available, I mean, it's good for you. It's nutritious.
hmm
And, you put soy sauce and wasabi on anything, it's going to be pretty good.
as long as they keep it safe, it was really scary what happened with McDonald's and the onions this week. We've been writing a lot about that, and I'm
Yeah.
sure our
Yeah,
listeners have been very tuned into that too.
absolutely. It's a big deal, especially since when you think of McDonald's, you think of easy, convenient, tasty, and cheap, and with safety implied there. And
Hmm.
now there is obviously all this talk about how expensive fast food is getting, and I mean so much so that like senators are investigating McDonald's for raising prices and stuff. And also like McDonald's in particular, but all of the quick service chains have their food safety buttoned up. I mean, I'm surprised that these onions actually got through because they really have really strict standards. I mean, the last time we had something like this, I think was Chipotle a few years ago.
Hmm.
That was a big problem. Um, and they've cleaned that up. And then before that, Jack in the Box in 1993, maybe.
Well, I remember Chi-Chi's too.
Oh,
Remember the
right.
Chi-Chi's with
Yeah.
the green onions? That was like, I think that's really made the chain tank and lose, its traction. I guess I don't even think there are any Chi-Chi's around anymore.
No, Chi-Chi's went out of business as a
Yeah,
result of that.
yeah.
In fact, it's interesting that Chipotle turned itself around and got through it.
Hmm.
But yeah, it can definitely be a business ender if you have a
But
food
it's
one.
not usually the fault of the chain, it's the fault of the supplier. So, but most consumers don't associate that with the problem. So that, they just blame the chain.
Right. And regardless of whose fault it is, you don't want to eat food that's going to make you sick.
Right.
But I
Exactly.
remember after the whole Chi-Chi's thing, I actually was flown to Mexico because they were scallions from Mexico,
Hmm.
from Mexicali, actually, which was made clear to me when I was flown to Culiacan, which is nowhere near Mexicali. It's in Sinaloa, near Mazatlan, actually. But they showed us all of their industrial tomato facilities and how clean and safe it was, and the cucumbers, and it was funny because already everyone was into local seasonal farm to table stuff, which was exactly the opposite of what they were showing us. And in fact, we asked the local people, like, how are these tomatoes? And they said, oh, I don't know. I don't eat them. They're just meant to be very, very strictly matched in terms of ripeness based on color, and then trucked to supermarkets and large casual dining chains and stuff,
Mm.
which was in contrast to the fruit that we had while we were there, which was all like local and sensational and
Mm.
bursting with flavor. But yeah, the big news this week and probably for the rest of the year is McDonald. At least restaurant news. There will be election news coming up soon, of course.
Yes.
But we're not a political podcast, so we don't need to talk.
No. Well, I also had a chance. Colonel opened its second location in New York City, and that's the chain that was started by Steve Ells, who was the founder of Chipotle. Also, it started out as an all-vegan restaurant or vegetarian, probably, and it was all automated. So they only had 3 employees in each store, but it was automated to the point that a robot put. Uh, Heated up things and packed things, and it was really a pretty cool concept. So they just opened the second one, which is in the East Village of New York. And I went last night, and actually they started serving animal proteins now, and they have a chicken sandwich on the menu because the plant-based chicken that they were using, they didn't feel was up to their standards. So they decided to switch to real chicken. So that was pretty interesting. And I think, that chain is really ready to expand, but it takes a lot of technology and know-how. And they actually have a central commissary where all the food is made, and then it's bicycled to the locations to reduce the carbon footprint. So it should be interesting to see how it expands.
Yeah, and how like once you're outside of a big city, how do you bicycle your stuff to
Right.
wherever it needs to go? I mean, I have a feeling that as they get to areas that are more spread out, they might have to revisit that. But we'll
Yeah,
see.
I
I
think
mean,
they're electric bikes, but even
oh,
so.
yeah, sure. Oh, and the fact that they're willing to stop being vegetarian and serve chicken is a sign that they're willing to adapt, which is good.
Yeah, definitely.
It's hard for a meatless chain to really do well.
Hmm.
You have yet to see one to take off, I think.
Well, and also Colonel, has a bona fide fine dining chef as their corporate chef. And so he really is more concerned with the quality and flavor of products than making it, vegetarian or plant-based. So I think this is a good direction they're going in.
Well, I haven't been to one yet, but now I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, you should try it.
Yeah, while you were there, I went to the opening of Hudson Club, which is a new restaurant in Midtown that, as one of my colleagues who was there observed, it is neither a club nor is it near the Hudson. I mean, it's 6, 7 blocks away from the Hudson River, which in New York City is really far. But John DeLucy is the chef. He's a big name chef,
Mhm.
and it was a crowded party with not a lot of food and only a couple of cocktails, so I didn't stay all that long. I had some nice conversations, which is always good. And they were passing out these really delicious oysters, little small oysters with some sort of apple mignonette on them that was
Mm.
so tasty that I'm telling you about it. And I was like, whoa, that's really good.
Yeah.
They had some chicken bites that were kind of dried out, and I didn't understand why they were passing them around, but the oysters were sensational. And that is a nice segue to my interview for this week, who is Chef Aaron Juvera, who is the chef de cuisine of Southerleigh Fine Foods and Brewery in San Antonio. And he is also a certified oyster master,
Mm.
level 1 certified oyster master, which I'll have him explain in a second. But first, I'd like him to tell us a little bit about Southerleigh.
So Southerleigh is a we're a southern influenced restaurant here in the Pearl. We are also a microbrewery that we brew all of our own beers in the restaurant. The restaurant's 2 levels. Our upstairs level is all brewing, and we are in the Pearl Brewery. We are in the actual brewing area of the Pearl, and it was important for us at the beginning to have that beer culture, and on top of that, celebrate Texas and what the bounty it has to offer. And I think as the years went on, we are still very Southern influenced, but there's a lot more cross-cultural influences as well that showcase across our menu, and to really allow our staff to express themselves as well.
And Aaron himself has been at Southerleigh since 2017, and he has been cooking in San Antonio since 2011.
And does he get a lot of the ingredients locally, like the seafood that he was talking about?
Yes, indeed. I asked him about that because San Antonio is landlocked, but it's only a 2-hour drive from the coast, which I didn't realize. And for Texas, that's close.
Yeah.
So, Galveston's not that far away. Corpus Christi is quite close. And so he went to the trouble of becoming a certified oyster master. Would you like to learn more about that, Pat?
Yeah, I would. I didn't even know there was such a thing.
It's pretty new. And
Yeah.
in fact, I'll have him explain it, but there are theoretically 4 levels of mastery. He's only at level 1 so far. But I think in this clip, he talks about that a little bit.
There is 4 total levels in the program. The program is rather new, though. So even though I am currently at level 1, there's only up to level 2 certification, and level 3 has sort of our guideline on it as well. And then level 4 hasn't been fully developed yet, but it's reserved for those who've truly mastered everything about oysters and whatnot.
So I wonder what the criteria are to be number 1. To finish the first level.
Well, what a good question, Pat. And I asked him to explain what it meant too.
Oh, good.
I thought it would be sort of brushing. What I felt was brushing the surface of it, and man, they went deep into everything about oysters, from cultivation history, the species, anatomy, techniques in checking, impact on the environment, and just quite a few different topics to cover for generally just approximately 6 hours of study and whatnot. But it's really been a catalyst for me to really start to delve into oysters as a specialty sort of deal for myself. And even as Southerleigh, I feel oysters have always been part of our identity, and really to hone in on that facet of what I feel is a pillar of our identity, and bring it to a new level from San Antonio and Texas as a whole.
Well, I imagine he knew how to shuck them before he started the course.
Yes, he did. Although that's not level one that you need to be good at shucking. That's two or three.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
Better, more oyster knowledge. And I did not realize that oysters were cultivated in Texas. But there's a reason for that, which I will have Aaron Juvera explain.
It's actually a very new industry in Texas. So Texas in 2019 started to take applications for permits to start raising for oyster cultivation. And Texas was one of the last places to open their waters for oyster cultivation. But then 2020 occurred, and that sort of put a hold on a lot of things. And then after all the quarantines and stuff lifted, you'd start to see they started getting back out to making these the farms and let the permits go out. And through the Oyster Master Guild, there's like a network of people in it as well. And so I met several people within it who were in Texas. And yeah, we made acquaintances. We talked to each other. We were always sharing information back and forth. And my friend Daniel in Austin, he was going out and checking out some of these oyster farms that I realized I was following, like on Instagram. And I was like, man, like I didn't realize they were here and that this was such a new thing. And it was sort of was the spark of, man, we have this fantastic like industry and product like at our doorstep. I need to bring it to Southerleigh. I need us to be at the front of this, like this new industry to really support it and bring it to fruition for us, because it's I felt like it was very important for us to maintain our like sort of Texas heritage roots and showcase what we have to offer over like bringing oysters from the East Coast in. They're fantastic, but we have these amazing oysters right at our doorstep. So let's show everybody.
Interesting. Well, we talked a little bit about bivalves last week, and it's still National Seafood Month in October. So this is very timely to hear about Texas's oyster industry, which I knew nothing about.
Neither, excuse me, neither did I. So that's exciting. And I asked Aaron Juvera about what I think we already know. Maybe our audience also knows about how good oysters are for the environment. But I'll have him talk about that a little bit.
One of the only sources of food that is like a complete net positive. So just like you said, oysters, they're bivalves, they're filter feeders. So once you put them in their water, they're filtering the water. They're filtering out of all the different like planktons or whenever they're named to filter. Each oyster will filter up to about 50 gallons of water a day. So you're looking at some of these farms with several 100,000 oysters at a time in there, and so they're filtering a lot of water. I mean, Amy Belair from Big Tree Oysters, we were the first restaurants that they serviced, and you know we've had a really close relationship over the year and talked about the growth of her oysters, the impact of like her oysters in their small bay. And she's noted that it's like they have seen like the water itself like change visually. They've seen like they've seen new schools of fish come back to their bay that they haven't seen in years, because of historically like oyster reefs in Texas were they were basically like broken apart and they were used for making like cement or asphalt or whatnot. So they're really wrecked like in the 50s and whatnot, never truly fully recovered. And on top of that, anytime you had a Gulf Coast oyster, it was just this wild oyster until human intervention happened. So she started to see like triggerfish and whatnot come back to their bay, which they hadn't seen in, I don't know how long, but, she's able to see this like direct impact of just their small farm. And, the oysters themselves will continue their farm, even though we're farming and taking the oysters, they still go through their life cycle. They're still releasing their spat and whatnot. So they're still going to keep helping the reefs below them build up by adding that spawn in there. And it's a pretty great effect, like having oysters with human intervention along our coast.
That's a nice story, isn't it?
It is really nice. And did he talk at all about how he prepares them at the restaurant? Does he serve them raw
He
or
serves a
cooked?
lot of them raw.
Mhm.
Sometimes they do some cooked preparations. Um, and I'm going to get to that in a second. But at the moment, like this is still quite a young industry. There are only 8 farms, he said, oyster farms, off the Texas coast. There are 2 or 3 more that have permits, and I wanted him to talk more about how those different oysters taste.
So right now at our restaurants, I have 3 different types of oysters, 2 of which are in the same bay. They're just at opposite ends of it. And then another oyster, which is just outside the bay, in another bay that sort of feeds into it. And all 3 of them are vastly different. We use coconut cream oysters from Coconut Oyster Company. And Coconut oysters are in an area where they're fed brackish water. So a nice mixture of like fresh and salt water. And her oysters have a beautiful like meatiness, umami to them, a little bit of like minerality, nice like firm flesh, and they have like a really great cream finish. And then Big Tree oysters, she's sitting more at like the top of the bay and gets fed a lot more salt water. So her oyster is really bright, nice sort of fresh bean, almost had like a sea bean sort of taste, a little vegetal. And then the last oyster that we are using is Blackjack Point oysters. And they're at the south side of Arandis Bay. And so he has a lot more flowing water. His oysters get nicer, bigger. They're a lot more on the saltwater seaside. They have this sort of sweet finish, little mineral in there. It's really interesting that all 3 of these farms are roughly 40 minutes from each other in any direction, and they're vastly different.
Interesting.
Yeah, I love that. And you've probably heard the term merroir, which the oyster people borrowed from the wine people who call it terroir. Mer
Right.
obviously is French for the sea, and so merroir is how the environment in which the oysters grow affects their taste. So they just started serving these oysters in March because, as I said, it's a new industry. And they just changed their menu a couple of weeks ago to bring in those multiple varietals. They do face a challenge in that Gulf oysters don't have a great reputation. They tend to be cooked because they tend to be kind of big and flabby, and the flavors aren't quite as robust as East Coast or West Coast oysters. And so Aaron Juvera has a strategy for, educating his customers.
Like I sort of told them to change their verbiage from Gulf oyster to like it's a Texas oyster. When I think Gulf oyster, I'm thinking of the large rocky guys that, I'm sure anyone's seen it, and that can be, some people come in for that and others find it not so appealing. So these Texas oysters that we have are really a fantastic like representation of what our coast has to offer now that they are given the tools and ability to do so.
So, letting people know that this is a different type of oyster from the traditional oyster. And I asked him how the reception has been from his guests.
So we've had a very positive response to this. We being in the Pearl, we see a lot of tourists and whatnot, and there are times where like I'll be working in the kitchen and I overhear people at our chef's table like, "Oh, you don't have East Coast oysters. I don't want any." And man, there's times where I've just shucked a couple oysters, walked up to them like, "Hey, look, I heard what you had to say. I don't want you to knock it till you try it. These are on me. Please just try them, and then I'll come see what you think." And they're just blown away every time at like the quality of this oyster, at like how fantastic it is that it's coming like from the coast so close to us, that it's this new industry. And I talked to them all about how what we've talked about so far, how it's a new industry, how it's affecting our waters, how it's net positive. And on top of that, at the restaurant, we are saving every single shell that we have. And we're part of a program called Sink Your Shucks. And we save all these shells and they go back to their facility where they process the shells, and then they're used to rebuild reefs again. So really it's a full circle sort of deal for us, where we're taking these oysters from the coast and then returning the shells to help facilitate their growth and rebuild those beds that that our society's used over, who knows how long.
I would think eventually too, because people are so into local foods and ingredients, that Texas oysters will have a cachet. If you live in Texas and you want to eat at a Texas restaurant.
For sure, especially if they taste as good as it sounds like they do. Like,
yeah,
that's a wonderful thing.
Mm.
And also, there is other seafood that is served at Southerleigh. And as Aaron mentioned, there are new fish coming in to the waters as it's getting all cleaned up. Some of them are invasive species, which he's happy to eat. And he also is making use of a lot of the bycatch that's available. The fish that fishermen didn't mean to catch, but
Mhm.
did. And, rather than throw that away or grind it up into fish meal or animal feed or whatever, obviously, just because you didn't mean to catch it doesn't mean they're not delicious.
Mhm.
And so I have a couple of clips about how he's treating these different bycatch fish.
Bycatches, it's fish that were essentially caught by accident that couldn't go back into the ocean. And so it would either go to waste or go somewhere else. So we're using this fish. It changes every week whenever I order multiple times a week to bring it in and just give full reign to, my chefs or staff or cooks to create something, and they knock it out. So it's we always have different influences coming through.
And one more clip about one fish that was challenging.
But we had this one fish called a black sickle pomfret the other day, and it was about 25 pounds. I could hold it like in my arms like this, and it had skin that was like half an inch, like it felt like it was half an inch thick, huge scales that dulled every knife we used. It took forever to break down, but man, it was super fun, and it's like they paid a great homage to the fish and what they created with it. So
I mean, they made a whole bunch of different things. I don't know that we really need to get into it, but that is making Aaron and his staff better at butchering fish and figuring out different fish and how to cut them up and what to do with them. So
Right.
that becomes an educational experience for him and his cooks and for his customers and everybody.
It's really a good sustainability story too, because I guess for a time these were called trash fish, but now they have a better connotation because people aren't throwing them away. I mean, I guess they were called trash fish because they used to be thrown away, but now they're actually revered.
Yes, they're called bycatch.
Yes.
And I remember years ago, I mean, this isn't super new, it's just becoming more popular. But I remember years ago, I wanted to write a feature on what the next big fish was going to be. And so I called Rick Moonen, who's a big, famous food chef. He was in Las Vegas at the time. He might still be there. I don't know. And he said, there's not going to be a next big fish. What's going to be big is focusing on what is available and using that, which obviously if it's available and you don't totally overfish it, that means it's a sustainable source because there's a lot of them. And so that's a way to be conscientious about preserving the biomass and the various species in the ocean and also provide delicious food And he was one of the early proponents of not eating Chilean sea bass around the turn of the century.
Mm-hmm.
And he knew that that fish was in trouble because the prices were going up and the quality was going down, which, obviously meant that there weren't that many of them. And so he championed not eating that much of that fish until fish breed, give them time and they'll come back.
Mm-hmm.
And especially if you have clean waters with a bunch of oysters in them.
Yeah, no, it's a good story.
I agree. And so we're both going to Chicago this coming week, right? We're going to go to the IFEC conference, International Food Service Editorial Council, which is always fun, although this is the last conference. It's folding up their tents, which is...
Right, but I think it'll be bittersweet, but I think we'll enjoy some good food. I know there's a taste around the first night, a dine around, and we're going to some really top Chicago restaurants. So we'll give a full report on that next week.
Yeah, it'll be good. And we'll figure out ways to continue to stay in touch with our IFIC friends, even though we
for sure. Yeah.
They're good people. I've made a lot of great relationships. And of course, we know each other better because we always went to IFIC.
Mm-hmm.
We also have lived in New York for most of our careers and go to similar events, which helps. But nice to stay in touch with everybody.
No, for sure. I mean, I think technology makes it easier to be in touch now. I mean, when IFIC first started in the 1950s, I believe, people were sending letters through the post office. So just press kits through the post office anyway. Everything was mailed or phone calls. So that's why we need IFIC to connect with, the food manufacturers and the publicists. But
and they would bring slides ready for us to use, transparency, which we don't need anymore. Now we can communicate electronically and get all this stuff. So IFIC has sort of run its course, but I'm sure we will find ways to stay in touch with everybody and continue to foster the beautiful relationships that we have fostered through it. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. We'll see you again soon.
Yeah, thanks. We'll give you a Chicago report next week.
That we will do for sure.
Control the kitchen chaos and streamline your back of house operations with Restaurant Technologies. Restaurant Technologies' total oil management solution is the end-to-end automated oil management system that delivers, filters, monitors, and recycles your cooking oil, taking the dirtiest job out of the kitchen and lets your employees focus on more important tasks. The total oil management solution helps prevent the burns, spills, slips, and falls that come with traditional oil management. Restaurant Technologies gives you and your employees peace of mind among the chaos of a commercial kitchen and can maximize efficiency for your business. And no upfront cost. Learn more about Restaurant Technologies and all the solutions they offer by visiting rti-inc.com or call 888-796-4997.